Published 12:57 EDT, the 11th of October 2017. Updated 12:57 EDT, the 11th of October 2017. For those in attendance at the F1 esports series and the audience online, it was easy to forget that you weren't watching the real thing. The Gfinity Esports Arena in London hosted the semi-final of the F1 esports series last night, where 40 of the world's top players on Codemasters F1 2017 competed for the chance to go to the final in Abu Dhabi. The players race over a number of heats, and the top 20 will be going through to the final next month at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the culmination of the actual F1 season. The Gfinity Esports Arena in London hosted the semi-finals of the F1 esports series last night. The analyst and commentary desks had a few faces from the real-world racing broadcasts. Over 60,000 entered the competition, and the 40 remaining battled it out for a spot in the final, which is fitting, because the presentation of the esport version of F1 is remarkably similar to its real-life counterpart. When the drivers aren't out on track, the host posed questions to analysts in the studio, which at the semi-final included former Formula 1 driver Karun Chandhok. When it was time to race, they handed over to the commentators, including former GP2 racer Davide Valsecchi. The drivers themselves were in special racing pods high above the stage, lined up so the audience could see their faces and wiggling, shoeless and in some cases, completely barefoot toes. They weren't playing on normal gamepads. Instead, they were sitting in state-of-the-art seats with pedals and racing wheels attached. Their lack of footwear was to get a better feel for the brake pedal. The presentation was remarkably close to the real-world Formula 1 broadcasts on television. 10 state-of-the-art racing pods with pedals and steering wheels were set up above the stage. It might be just a video game, but in most aspects, it's a hardcore simulation. The racers had to look after their tires, make on-the-fly changes to brake balance, account for changing weather, and adjust their pit strategy accordingly. The winner gets a money-can't-buy experience, as Formula 1's global head of digital Frank Artofer puts it. They'll get access to a Grand Prix next year, and their likeness will actually be put into next year's version of the game. As for how Artofer and the F1 team plans to get people watching the esports version, he hopes there will be a natural crossover. It's running on Sky's F1 channel, which suits itself to the crossover of fans. But the beautiful thing is the drivers in this sport. There's some crossover with what it's like to sit in a Formula 1 car. Obviously we don't have the G-force here today, but certainly there's some skill sets that overlap. And in fact, a number of the F1 2017 players have background in real-life racing, and even have aspirations to enter the real-world sport. Cem Bolukbashi, 19, from Istanbul has been competing in simulation racing games for 4 years, but he's also going to be racing in Formula 4 next year. The whole goal is to be in real Formula 1, said Bolukbashi, but he believes sim racing will be a stepping stone. Rather than doing 10 years of karting, you can do a couple of years of karting, and then mainly focus on sim racing to make the transition to real cars. But for others in the tournament, it's all about the esports aspect. Brendan Lee is an 18-year-old British sim racer, and he dominated the competition in his heats. If I can make a career out of it, I'll 100% go for it. Currently I'm a kitchen manager, but if the chance came where I could make money from this, I'd drop that in a heartbeat. The F1 esports series finalists, 20 players going to Abu Dhabi: Brendan Lee, Nicolo Fioroni, Igor Fraga, Patrick Protege, Maximilian Benek, Eilert van der Waal, Tiziano Brianna, Gianfranco Giglioli, Harrison Jackson, Uk Saltunk, Sala Saltunk, Cedric Tomi, Gambolik, Bashilberto Filtrans, Ben Cerner, Patrick Holzman, Frederick Rasmussen, Joni Termala, Mads Sorensen, Fabrizio Donoso del Agdo. But since the prize is just money can't buy for now, we'll need to wait for the future. Lee says there needs to be a baseline salary, much like the upcoming Overwatch League will have to make it worth it for the players. At least he's aiming low for now. They need to have a £15,000 yearly salary to make it possible for people to quit their jobs. Racing esports are just starting to take off, but in a few years we may start to see them earning far more, in line with the current biggest esports. Lee also has plans for the format a future competition could take. He envisions a future where an esports league takes place concurrently with the Formula 1 season, with races taking place during the same race weekends as their real-life counterparts. The finalists will be competing in Abu Dhabi at the actual Grand Prix during the race weekend. Meanwhile, for other players, it's enough just to be part of the experience. A nice story from the tournament was the qualification of two 17 and 21-year-old brothers, Sanook and Sala Saltunk. Sala studies aerospace engineering at university, and Sanook studies motorsport engineering, and they both have some background in kart racing. I'm going to continue doing both esports and study, said Sala, and if there's a good opportunity I might jump over, but I definitely enjoy what I'm studying. For Sanook, esports will be a nice fallback if something goes wrong with college. They no longer live together, but they still practice with each other online, and Sala was very much acting as the big brother in the run-up to the semifinals. I'm going to be honest, I didn't practice much for the semifinals, said Sanook. It was really frustrating, exclaimed Saleh. He put hard work into the qualifying, but when the semifinals were coming up, he hardly did 10% of that. He told me to practice, said Sanook. He said you're not going to be able to qualify, and I did struggle in qualifying, but I managed to turn it around in the race. As for who's better, the young men are very diplomatic. He'll probably say he's better, he'll probably say I'm better, but we rate each other highly for sure, said Salah. There are sometimes some arguments though. I'll echo that, said Sanook, but what is it like for the audience when the real thing is on throughout the year? Is there any reason to watch a video game version too? All you have to do to get the answer is to watch. Visually, apart from the floating name banners above the cars on the track, F1 2017 looks incredibly realistic. These drivers are seriously good too, taking the correct racing lines and correcting any small mistakes with ease. There's no prize money involved this year, but the winner does get to be in next year's F1 game. Some of the players involved have background in actual racing, while others are just gamers. In fact, the semifinals were arguably more exciting than watching the real thing. In Formula 1, if they qualify well, the racers will often try and defend their position. If something goes wrong, there is always next race to recover. But at the F1 esports series, there's no room for error. Not making it into the top 20 of the 40 participants means you're going home and you'll have to wait another year. With this being the case, we saw seriously aggressive wheel-to-wheel racing. The drivers dove down the inside line, laid on the brakes, and the stewards had to make some important decisions regarding penalties for some of the maneuvers. This is better than going to an actual F1 race, said Lee. If you get a ticket and go, you see a driver every minute and a half, and you don't get to see anything other than a helmet and a car. Here you got to see their full emotion. In an F1 car they can't put a camera right next to your face. We got to see the elation of drivers when they qualified for the finals, and Lee told stories of tears backstage from players who will be going home. In Abu Dhabi, when it's all on the line, it's going to be even more exciting.